Welcome to Paranormal Latte Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Kelly Renee Schutz. Sit back and relax with us. Grab yourself a really good drink. Spend an hour and let's delve into a world of chatter about the mysteries of the unexplained. Whether you are a skeptic or a believer makes no difference. It's not always in your imagination. Enjoy your day. Now that was good. We are broadcasting on the United Public Radio and UFO Paranormal Radio Networks, 105.3 FM from the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM in New Orleans. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests do not necessarily reflect those of the audience, United Public Radio and UFO Paranormal Radio Networks, its hosts, affiliates, and or Paranormal Latte Podcast, Paranormal Universal Press LLC, and Diamond Point Entertainment LLC. This show is pre-recorded. Now that was good. Welcome everyone to yet another episode of Paranormal Latte Podcast. My name is Dr. Kelly Renee Schutz. I am the host and the producer of this show. Today we have with us Joshua Sparks, as in Bishop Joshua Sparks, and we had quite an interesting conversation regarding what most people would term God, higher power, guardian angel, you name it, we label it, and it's probably all the same type of energy coming from the same source. Who really knows?
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. It's an honor to be here with you, and I've looked forward to this for some time now.
Well, this is going to be a good discussion tonight because it's going to be a little bit different than most of my discussions that I have with my guests, but I think everyone's going to find you to be wonderful and interesting, and so I think we're just going to start right at it right here. So now I'm going to start with the basic foundation question with you, and we will evolve it from here because I have a feeling that we're going to take this in a new direction tonight. And so the first question I want to ask you is, I do want you to go back as far as you can remember, and from either a spiritual, a paranormal, or an otherworldly experience, one or all of them. Tell us a little bit about what piqued your interest or what caught your attention, and we'll evolve it from there.
Okay, well, that's a really good question, Dr. Kelly, and I always go back to my birth. The reason I do that is because I was born in this war. The doctor told my dad he didn't know if I was going to survive or if my mother was going to survive or both of us were going to die. When she was pregnant with me, she had to be rushed to the hospital, and I was born premature and I was born crippled. And so I guess you could say that when Satan dealt the cards, he dealt me a losing hand from an early age. 8 days in the hospital with the croup, and I was jaundiced and of course crippled. I got to come home. My mother got to go home 8 days before I did. But on that 8th day, the first place my parents took me to was church. And the minister at the time, who's since died, prayed for me. And there was a precious sister in the audience that took me in her arms and prayed for me as well. And God gave me a miracle that day. He healed my body. And so going back to that event in my life was kind of like me being born into this battle. I didn't ask to be born into it, but I was born into this battle. And from that, there were many events in my life that took place thousands of events in my life that took place. But I think really my encounter with Jesus at 11 years of age, when I made a commitment to serve him, and then 6 months later, when Jesus appeared to me, it was more than a vision. It was real, and called me to preach. And, not only called me to be a disciple, if you will, but called me into this preparation for where I'm at today. I didn't get here to where I'm at today as a spiritual warrior, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. It took me many years to get to where I'm at today. And I'm still in training. I'm still in preparation.
So I have a question for you. When you were born crippled, miracles, people would term them as it's a miracle, or something, you receive something that you can't explain from somewhere. Would you say that, do you believe in that miracles do happen? Because obviously you're here with us today. I don't know how crippled you were, per se, or how bad it was, but if they released you from the hospital and then you were able to get, someone at church to hold you, because some of them, it just depends. What would be your perspective about all that, especially with miracles?
Well, I've seen God do many, many miracles. And some of the things that I'm going to say tonight on this program may seem strange to some and unusual to others. My right leg was crippled. I probably would have had use of my left, maybe. I'm not sure. But there was a pillow. This is, of course, is back in the 70s. There was a pillow that they put in between my legs to hold my legs together. And when they took me to the church, or to the place where the event was going on, they prayed for me, and God honored my mom and my dad's faith. Mom took that pillow out from between my legs as soon as we got home, and they never thought about it. They never questioned their faith, and as you can see, I'm able to walk well today. But God, excuse me, God is a God of miracles, and that's one of the earmarks that shows that God is who he says he is. From creation itself, the creation of life, all the way down to, the miracles that Jesus did in the New Testament. Those are all attributes of God. God's a healer. God's a deliverer. God brings freedom. He brings peace. He brings divine strength when we're weak. Mm-hmm. But miracles are real. Miracles turn the hearts of men to God. Now, the problem is in nominal churchianity, if I could use that word, we tend to build men up to the level of God. And these men who claim to have these gifts are worshiped and praised as if they're God. And when they fall, when they falter, people tend to no longer want to associate with Jesus or the Bible, because these men fell and these men were the great power of God. And the problem is miracles are not given by God to point us to men, but to point us to God. That's why Jesus came, and that's why Jesus did miracles, to get men to believe in God. And I've seen 1,000 miracles. I could sit here and tell you of the account in Huntington, West Virginia, where I seen a man raised from the dead. I could tell you an account when I had what I only can say or consider to be an out-of-body experience, when I was taken by an angel to a hospital that I'm not aware of, and prayed for a gentleman that was coming out of brain surgery that had died, and his family was around his bed. And we prayed, and God raised him from the dead. I've seen all kinds of miracles like that. I've seen people spit up cancers. I've seen blinded eyes open. I've seen God perform heart surgery on people. And I don't mean open heart surgery, but people that have had heart disease to the extent that they were going to die and went back to the doctor. The doctors have said, hey, someone give you a brand new heart. But those miracles, though, and here's the thing, Dr. Kelly, miracles point people to God. Mm-hmm. They don't point people to man. Mm-hmm. Because it's only God that has the authority and the power. Just like a story I heard one time, this young man's truck had broke down, And this gentleman came and he pulled up behind this young man, and he had a suit and tie on. The young man kind of looked at him strange, as if to say, what are you going to do to help me with my truck? This guy's a businessman. And excuse me, he said, pop the hood and let me take a look at it. He said, old man, I don't think you'll be able to fix that truck, but here, let me amuse you. Go ahead. So he popped the hood of the truck, and he got down in and he started tinkering around. He said, let me go grab something. He went back to his car and he came back and put this part on the truck, and he said, now you start it. And he said, wow, I'm really amazed at your ability to work on this truck. Are you a mechanic? He said, son, my name's Henry Ford, and I designed the truck.
Oh, geez.
So God designed our bodies. And only God, even if it's through a doctor's hands, only God can perform miracles.
Mm-hmm. I was going to add to your miracle list because I had, but I want you to think about this for a second, because this is going to make people wonder, including myself, who is responsible. That's why I want to bring up this own miracle story that I had. And essentially, in a nutshell, I was not feeling well for a while. And I went to write a book in Las Vegas, and I was on the highest floor. And I was jokingly saying that I was going to look out the window and see a UFO or something, or a flyby. I wanted to see something, and that's crazy because there's too much light pollution even at that, at the highest level. And when I turned around, the lights were flickering and things were going on in the room, and then it went black in the room, and then I was sitting on the bed and I heard 2 taps behind my head, and then I blacked out. And the next morning when I woke up, I felt very refreshed, very clean, like someone gave me an oil change, And I just thought, this is kind of strange, and I don't know what happened to me last night, but I felt very different, and I thought, this is weird. Okay, so if you're somebody who believes in otherworldly experiences such as aliens and extraterrestrials and all that to be termed that, you might believe that something paid you a visit. If you're the type of person who believes in apparitions and spirits and ghosts and all that sort of thing, you might think that maybe something was there that tampered with you. Now, in my case, it was a couple months later when I discovered that I had cancer. And so, because I just wasn't doing well, and it came to a point where something had to be done, and I found this doctor I was guided to go to this doctor. I had gone to a couple of them, and he did everything he possibly could to try to figure out what was wrong with me. And that's when he discovered I had cancer. But what he said to me after the surgery was done was, he said, you are a miracle. You are a miracle. We found the cancer. You are a miracle. We got the cancer. You should be okay now. And then, like any person, when you're not feeling well after a surgery, I scoffed and I kind of went, yeah, right, sure. And he put his face right up to mine, probably about 2 inches away from my nose. And he said, I guess you didn't really hear me very well. I'm going to say this to you again. You are a miracle. We never would have found it. And basically divine intervention. So at that point, I shut up and I basically thought to myself, he's kind of gruff about this. He's very serious. I guess this is not a routine thing that he would normally say to somebody unless he was very serious about it. It was at that point that people ask me, well, if you had an otherworldly experience and something like that was in your room, or you're abducted or something or whatever, or cleansed out, did any kind of extraterrestrial do that to you? I had anyone who has a different thought process about what they believe in. I did have a woman who said, an extraterrestrial cleaned your blood. The doctor says, I'm a miracle, but he didn't necessarily give credit to, I didn't tell him, someone told me an extraterrestrial. I never said anything like that. But then I thought that he was leaning towards a higher power, guardian angels, some divine intervention, God, that kind of thing. And so I gave praise to two things. I gave praise to whoever gave me the oil change. That's one thing, which was the blood change. They were there to clean my blood, which is exactly what happened. And then the doctor, who was somehow miraculously guided or channeled or whatever, or determined, and he found it, but through the help of divine intervention, which I also said was God. And I've always been thanking God and whoever else might have been involved to this day. I am cancer free to this day, and I give my credit to many sources. But what would you say to somebody who's been through an experience like that? Have you ever had anyone ever say to you, yeah, I think there was something extraterrestrial in my room and they cleaned my blood. And then I went and they found the cancer. And so I thank God for whatever they did to do that. How would you approach that with somebody, or what would you say, considering there's two perceptions here?
Well, extraterrestrial is a word that we've made up. Something otherworldly that shows up into your life and cleanses you. I mean, let's face it, for lack of a better term, if you think of the word extraterrestrial, something that's not of this world, even though God created this world, God could be considered an extraterrestrial. Mm-hmm. Now, before everybody, takes off running with that and says, "Oh, Bishop Sparks says God's extraterrestrial," no. But God is alien to this earth. I mean, he created it, but he's not from this earth. Anything that's native to something is made up of the same elements that the earth or that whatever it's created from. And God's a spirit. God is an otherworldly being. So, I think it's funny, and I think that it was divine direction on God's part leading me to tell that story about Henry Ford. I think that the Henry Ford showed up and changed your oil for you, so to speak, your blood. Mm-hmm. I think it was God that showed up and gave you a blood transfusion. Can he do it? Absolutely. He can do anything he wants to. Mm-hmm. There's one thing about me, though, Dr. Kelly. I'm very open-minded. I minister to a lot of different people from all walks of life, from an addiction background, a mental health background, and I minister to a lot of people, and I teach a lot of people, and I do not ever discredit somebody's experience. Mm-hmm. You've had that experience, and it's not my right to deny that. If you've experienced it, you've seen it, you've witnessed it, who am I to say that you haven't? Mm-hmm. That's just preposterous. And that takes away from, something spectacular that's happened in your life. That you tell your story. Your story is important. And it's not up to me. It's not my right to take that away from you. I absolutely believe what you're saying to be absolutely the truth. Mm-hmm. But I believe that it was God that intervened in your life. And it was God that showed the doctor where to look.
Right.
I believe that it's God that gives these doctors the wherewithal and the ability to, how can you stand for 8 or 10 hours operating on somebody's heart? Yeah. It saved that person's life if there's not some kind of a supernatural strength and a supernatural guidance to give you the ability to do that. That goes far beyond what you learn in the textbook or even as a resident doctor. And it's a calling. Yeah,
and I agree with that. And see, the thing is that with my experience of what went on in that room that night, and I was there by myself and with all the quirky stuff, I really thought at first it started out as, because Las Vegas is very, very haunted. I'm just telling you that. It's tremendously haunted. I've had so many different experiences there, but I can't necessarily tell you that they are like a human-like apparition that didn't go to the light or whatever, they hung around or whatever. I just knew that something something at first paranormal felt like it was in the room, but it was when it was the point where I blacked out. It went knock, knock behind my head, which was adjacent to the bathroom. And there wasn't anybody else in the room, and there was nobody in the bathroom. And it wasn't an echo coming from somebody else's wall. So rule all that out. No, it was knock, knock, and I blacked out and I was gone. Now, some people have asked me, oh my goodness, was it the extraterrestrial or the otherworldly being or whatever, did that give you cancer? No, it did not give me cancer. It was there to actually clean my blood. I felt different in the morning, and it definitely was something unusual. And that's why when I talk at conferences, I have a slide: spiritual, extraterrestrial, or otherworldly, I'm forgetting the other one. But the thing is what one do I give credit to? Paranormal. What do I give credit to? Who do I give credit to? We know it's an energy. We know that we're experiencing something, but what exactly are we experiencing? Now, let me bring this back to you. I think during a conversation that you and I had, you had mentioned to me that you have actually seen God. Can you describe that, or Jesus, can you describe that moment and what happened and how did you come and what did he look like? Or was it a she?
I would be happy to describe that moment. As a young man, I was raised in the woods. We have Native American blood in our family. You can't tell by looking at me, but my grandmother was Cherokee Indian, and my great-grandfather, great-grandmother. And on my mother's side, Chief George Sizemore is my great-great-great-grandfather. And I was sitting around a fire. I mean, it was just as real as me sitting here talking to you tonight, Dr. Kelly, sitting around a fire, and I was by myself, which is kind of unusual because I've always been an outgoing person. I've always had a lot of friends in and out of my house. Two of my best friends that I've been friends with for 40 plus years were usually with me in everything that I've done. But I'm sitting around this fire and it's pitch black around. And you know how, you're sitting around the fire, immediately around you can see the light. But you look out into the wilderness and you see the darkness. Yeah. Well, I heard something moving in the darkness. And of course, when I was younger, I was 80 pounds soaking wet, and I thought I could whip a bear and a lion. I was, and I jumped up to defend myself, and out of the darkness came Jesus Christ. And I knew exactly who he was the moment I seen him, and I fell to my knees. Just the look of his bronze skin and that dark black beard on his face and the prayer shawl that he had over his head. He's not what you typically see in paintings and in pictures and on movies. He's not a Anglo-Saxon. He was very Middle Eastern, very dark. Of course, that doesn't matter. I don't care if he's purple. He loves me, and that's all that matters. And when he came to me in that vision, not only when I seen him, I knew he was, and I fell down in his presence. And the Bible says in Philippians chapter 2 that every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that he's Lord. Now, Jesus is not a 125-pound, 5'5" guy. Okay. When I seen Jesus is 6'2", 245 pounds, broad-shouldered, strong, not some weak, because he couldn't be weak. Not only was he beaten and made to walk and carry his cross, but he hung for 6 hours after the fact that he had been beaten, a beating that would kill any normal man. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget how he felt. It was just as if he just enveloped me. He picked me up off the ground and enveloped me in his arms and held me close. And then we walked around to the campfire and he set me down on a rock. Mm-hmm. And that is very, not metaphoric, but it's also very prophetic because, Matthew 16, 18, and 19, Jesus said, when he was talking to Peter and addressing Peter and the rest of the disciples, Jesus asked the question, who do men say that I am? And they said, well, some say you're John the Baptist or Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. Mm-hmm. And he said, who do you say that I am? And Peter said, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. And he said, listen, Peter, on this rock, flesh and blood hasn't revealed this to you, but my Father. And on this rock, on this revelation, not Peter. Peter, the church wasn't built on Peter. If it had been, it'd have fell away a long time ago. But he said, upon this revelation, I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail. So I felt as if when he set me down on that rock, he was showing me, I've placed you on this right foundation. Ephesians 2:20-21 says we're built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus himself being the chief cornerstone. So I felt that was significant. He was showing me that he's placed me on the rock, the right foundation. And he began to speak to me, told me, he called me to preach, told me that I would go to the world and preach. Some of the things that he spoke, I was a young man, I didn't understand. Like one of the things he revealed later, that through my ministry, he would help to restore the original apostolic government back to the church. I didn't know what government was at 12. I mean, what kid thinks about the government at the age of 12? The thing that was very, very awesome about that experience is there's some things, like I said, that he spoke. I seen his mouth moving, but I couldn't hear him. It would be later revealed to me. But the call to preach and the feeling that I felt, and just that I was awestricken and I was moved. And it's something that has caused me. It started a love affair that's lasted for 34 years. And my heart's desire is to be pleasing to him, to be a disciple, a follower of him, and to one day get to live in his presence forever, because the peace that I felt in his presence, there's nothing that this world has that compares to that. And I'll never forget Dr. Kelly, when he left, as he was leaving, he turned and looked back at me and he said, Joshua, remember the scriptures. And from that moment forward, I became a student of the Word of God. And I will never forget that experience as long as I live. Now, that wasn't the only time I've seen him. I've seen him several times. I'll tell you another time that I seen him, and it was very strange. And this was more like a vision. I'm standing in this Colosseum, and I had a robe on. It looked like, thousands of years ago in like a Greek Colosseum. Excuse me. And there was people in robes out in the audience, and I'm speaking. And as I look out into the audience, ever so often I would see him pop out from behind people as I was making a point, and he would look up at me like that, as if he was giving me his approval. And another time, and I promise I'm going to shut up, another time I'm standing in the crowd of disciples, and I'm standing there with them, and Jesus is speaking in front of us, and he's looking out at the crowd behind us, and he said, as long as I'm in the world, and then he locked his eyes with mine. He said, I am the light of the world. And I know to some people that sounds unusual, and some people say, well, what's he on, or what's he drinking, what's in that coffee cup? But listen, it's an experience that I had, Dr. Kelly, and it has shaped my life. And it's an experience that I will never forget, and I will carry with me forever. That's why I do what I do. I don't do it for fame. I don't do it for money. I don't do it for popularity. I do it because I have a divine mission to tell people about this man that changed my life, that loves them and wants to change their life, because I want to return to be with him one day. And by the way, both Joshua and I talk for a living, so we're going to compete with each other tonight as who's gonna get the most say out of this whole show. I want to go back a moment to up to that point when you saw him. I'm going to presume it's a him, not a her, because you never know. People are like, well, how do you know it's not her? Up until that point, were your parents really into church and the Word of God and where you were brought up and everything, or did things seem to just all of a sudden change to the way you looked at it was more serious after that point where you saw him? But how was it before that point? Well, we were raised in church up to a point, but mom and dad stopped going to church. We wasn't even attending church at the time. My little sister had went to vacation Bible school, and she drugged me along. I wanted to be outside smoking cigars and chewing tobacco and fighting with the neighborhood kids. I had no time for God. I mean, it did not fit into my schedule. And I know somebody said, well, 11 years old, yeah. My grandmother chewed tobacco, and she let me have all the tobacco that I wanted. But when I was a kid, you could go buy from the gas station. There was no age limit. They didn't care back then, 150 years ago.
But, you're not that. You're not that.
I know,
old. You don't look a day over 100. Okay.
Thank you. What name do you want me to put on the check that I send to you? Now, let me say mindfully that it's a rubber check and it will bounce all the way to the bank. Yeah. But no, Mom and Dad had quit going to church. Mm-hmm. My little sister had me, she drugged me along. She said, I want you to go to Vacation Bible School. And I'm like, whatever. So I went to Vacation Bible School and I liked it. Mm. I enjoyed it. So I decided, you know what, I'll go back a few times because I liked the youth group. The youth pastor at the church was cool. He wore blue jeans and a T-shirt, didn't wear a tie. And I've played drums for a long time. So they let me play drums up there. I filled in. And the gentleman who was the regular drummer, of course, this is a monstrous double bass Tama drum set. And I felt like Neil Peart sitting up on stage, like I was just rocking out and playing double bass, Mm-hmm. And Mom and Dad, they never joined us for service, but we kept going back. And I'll never forget this as long as I live. The more and more I heard the word of God preached, and the more that I read the Bible, I felt a heaviness. Not necessarily for all the sin that I committed, but there was a heaviness on me that we call conviction. And we used to feel it years ago in the church, and now it seems like conviction's been replaced with fog machines and dark lights and superstar preachers, and that conviction feeling's not there like it used to be. In my heart, it's still there. I carry it every day. But I'll never forget January 23rd, 1991. Desert Storm was taking place. The number one hit was Ice Ice Baby by Vanilla Ice. Mm-hmm. I had that CD, by the way. That's back when we had CD players. One that had the big 5-disc changer. But it was a cold, snowy January night. And I was sitting at the table reading the Bible. The passage I read was about Jesus' crucifixion. And I broke down, Dr. Kelly, and I began to weep and begin to cry. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know, because Mom and Dad wasn't going to church at the time. I didn't know what to do, but I did what I felt like I needed to do. I turned to my dad and I said, Dad, I don't know what to do. I feel all this sorrow, this sadness. He said, well, what's going on? And I told him. My dad said, me and you need to pray together. So we knelt down by his bed. And I always said it this way, that night I gave myself to Jesus and he gave himself to me. I felt his hand on my back. It wasn't my daddy's hand. I felt the hand of God on my life. Mm-hmm. And immediately, once I made Christ Lord of my life, we went to my great aunt's house on that cold, snowy January night to do something computer-wise. My dad's a computer geek, and he's got every retro computer ever made still to this day, and the guy can program anything. Mm-hmm. But we went up there to do something with the computer, and I shared with my great aunt and uncle the change that took place in my life. And I haven't looked back. Have I been perfect? No. Have I made mistakes? Absolutely, 1,000 of them. I make 1,000 mistakes a day. But one thing, Dr. Kelly, I know for sure that wasn't a mistake was the day that I said yes when Jesus knocked at my door.
Years back, or quite a few, when I was teaching, there was a trend that went on where I was in Indiana, and there was a trend where there was a lot more young aged individuals going to church. Mm-hmm. And so, I thought that was very interesting, considering the churches were not, where I was at, were not as full as they used to be. And I usually go to church, but I usually go to church on like Christmas Eve or something like that. So it's not like I don't believe. What are you seeing right now, because I've been away from this for a while? Are you seeing a trend of more young people going to church again, or are you seeing that in a decline?
Well, social media would want you to believe that there is a trend of people going back to church, but the Apostle Paul warns us in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3, that there'd come a great falling away. And I've seen that great falling away, not just in church attendance, but in the ministry. You know, people that once served God have turned and walked away, not because they didn't love God, but because, you know, people don't know how to stay fresh when things get old. Yeah. It's the same way when I counsel with couples. You know, your relationship with God is much like that of a husband and wife. Mm-hmm. You know, you can't expect the relationship to be one-sided. Mm-hmm. You know, it's 100% both ways, and God gives 100%.
It's interesting because everybody that's listening to this program right now, it all starts somewhere, all right? It usually starts when we're young, especially if you're in some of these, just it doesn't matter where you are. If you're in a place or an environment that the community really does embrace their gatherings at churches or whatnot, or have their potlucks down in a church basement or whatever, which still, by the way, does happen with my relatives in a very small town just in another state. The one thing that I would wonder, though, about is how do you answer to somebody? We just had a very absolutely horrific thing happen in Minnesota where a young person went and shot through the glass and shot through the cracks and had it all figured out into a church where the kids were doing their initial prayers or whatever before they were to start the excitement of their school year and their day. And he ended up killing, I don't know how many it was, several, and injuring several. I can't remember. Maybe killing a few, injuring a lot more, and some are still in the hospital. So in this church, they're doing their prayers. They're believing that God is with them at all times. And then you have this rifle sticking through a crack or blowing through the glass, which shatters all over a lot of these kids, you know, these shards. And how do you answer to something like that? The very first thing someone would say is, if this was the house of God, why on earth did this happen? And my husband, by the way, has just reported that at his church now, they are locking the doors. Well, there's a big risk with that, especially if there's a fire and you can't get out and you don't know how to work the lock. He said that the lock at this church is so kind of old that, you know, you don't want to get stuck in there and then burned to death, you know, that kind of thing. But he said they started locking the doors to his church. And I said they can still shoot through the glass. They can still figure out a way to hide in there and then ambush people, which you can't stop. So how do you explain to people that God was not there to protect me or save me or do something with this kid or whatever, an adult? How do you approach something like that?
That's a very good question. And I've had this question asked to me many times since this event took place. Of course, you know, man's heart's corrupt. We always talk about what man puts into themselves that corrupts them, but Jesus said out of a man's heart comes murder, idolatry, fornication, hatred, you know. And the thing is, we often want to ask, where's God at when something like this takes place? And the thing is, Dr. Kelly, we have to remember, excuse me for coughing, we've got to remember that the scripture says in Ephesians 6:12, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and against powers and against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. And this kind of goes back to what I was talking about. When I was born, you know, my mom and dad could have said, well, where's God? Why is he going to let me and my son die? As a result of the complications that she had during the pregnancy. And, you know, in that particular chapter, the Ephesians chapter 6, Paul is addressing the church in Ephesus. And what he's doing is he's preparing the believers for the spiritual reality that the Christian life is a battleground. And in the surrounding passages, verses 10 through 18, he introduces the armor of God, emphasizing that spiritual tools like truth and righteousness and faith and salvation in the Word of God are essential to resist the devil's scheme. Now, a lot of people don't want to mention the devil. They want to have a nameless enemy, or they want to blame God. But you've got to remember that there is an enemy that's as old as time itself, an enemy that's done its very best to destroy mankind. And Jesus himself said in John 10:10, the thief cometh not but for to steal, kill, and destroy, but I've come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. And not just from my viewpoint alone, but from the church's viewpoint, it's not metaphorical only. It's mystical and practical. And the church, the sacraments, prayers, and the saints are considered real weapons against spiritual evil. You said you was raised Lutheran, even in the Lutheran church. Because the Lutheran Church, Catholic Church, Old Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church, Episcopal Church, there's so many similarities, more similarities than there are differences. But the thing is, we can't rely on human strength alone, but on the grace given, through Christ. And I believe it's 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. It says that God has not given us the spirit of fear, but love, power, and a sound mind. So if we're operating in fear, that makes us weak, hateful, and crazy, because that's the opposite of love, power, and sound mind. And we could break that down. I mean, I could sit here for 2 hours and break down what Paul meant in that 12th verse, but we don't have the time to do that. But I just want to say this. We know that guy perpetrated evil, and he took little children's lives, vulnerable lives, in a place where they should have been protected. But let's make it clear that the enemy is not human beings. Conflicts with others, social struggles, and even persecution are often manifestations of deeper spiritual battles. Let me stress that understanding this prevents what I call moral error. One does not sin against God or neighbor by misidentifying human conflict as purely spiritual, but rather we're called to love our enemies. Jesus said, love your enemies, while being vigilant against demonic influences that seek to exploit our human weaknesses. If the devil can keep us fighting against each other, we'll never come together as people, not just of one faith or one particular faith, but all the people in the world. If we continue to make enemies out of people, and we know that it's the people that perpetrates these crimes and that does these horrible things to other people, but we've got to realize that there is a real influence. There's a darkness, and this is a battleground. And you and I, Dr. Kelly, were caught in the middle, in the crossfire. And we've got to be, wise enough to know that there are casualties to every war. I'm not saying those babies were a casualty of war. Don't mistake that. But what I mean is, oftentimes we do more damage with the words we speak than anybody does with a gun.
Yeah, and the thing is, as you're mentioning this, I'm thinking about another situation that occurred. These situations happen all the time. Then what happens as a result? Then we have copycats, and like, who wants to be the champion here of the worst, most horrific situation you can possibly think of? Well, I am a little fearful now of even sitting in a movie theater, because I do recall years ago when someone came into the movie theater, not one that I was in, but this was another one of those ugly ambush situations where they came in through the exit door in the at the front of the movie theater, and people thought at first that the person who was carrying a rifle was part of something to do with the movie. So they didn't think anything about it at first, because they were a little bit bewildered, and that was until he started shooting people and literally ambushing and shooting massive amount of people in this movie theater, in which case I don't sit up front anymore. I don't even want to sit in back. I just figure if someone's going to start shooting, where do you put yourself you can't even go to a movie theater anymore. So it's not just a church. It can be just about anywhere. I know that working at, I used to work at the greatest state fair in the United States, which is here in Minnesota. And of course, we do very well. We have to have, and people don't know this, but we have people in helicopters and surrounding the area sometimes because of possibility of when you get 200,000 people, literally on one day in this area, you're hunting ground for somebody who wants to come and make that. They don't care about the small towns. They care about big numbers or things that will leave the greatest impact. Little kids, movie theaters with these themes that who would ever go into who would ever do this. So it happens everywhere, but it depends on the mentality, and we'll talk about next what you have to do with some of these individuals that you counsel, because it's like, I don't know how you turn somebody around, especially if their wiring up here in their mind has gotten damaged or gone astray or put itself into the wrong place. Then all of a sudden you have an issue. So Bishop Joshua, tell people what you do for part or all of your job. You're a counselor, correct? And who do you counsel?
I counsel people that have addiction problems and mental health issues, because the two go hand in hand. 8 out of every 10 addicts has some type of trauma from their childhood, whether it be physical, sexual, verbal. They've had abandonment issues, and not just abandonment, but neglect. Neglect is just as damaging as someone punching you with their fist, because when we're little, we form attachments, whether they be negative or positive, and those attachments carry on throughout the rest of our life. If you're raised in a home where your father beat your mother, and your mother was subservient to your father, and she continued to allow that behavior to happen, you're a female when you get older, chances are you'll probably be in a relationship with a guy that's physical and that beats you because that's normal to you. It's what we're attached to. And the only way to change people's minds is to first help them deal with that trauma, because a lot of people that have trauma think that they're the cause for that they're the reason behind the trauma. They don't see the fact that they're the victim. So getting people to be able to see themselves the way that they truly are in the situation as the victim, and getting them to detach themselves from all the negative things from the past, working on self-forgiveness and forgiveness of the perpetrator, and being able to build positive self-worth, positive self-image, positive self-value, kindness, compassion, mercy, and being able to free themselves from those things that they allow to bind them, because resentment works much like this. It's like you drinking poison, waiting on somebody else to die. You can spend your whole life resenting people for all the bad things that's happened in your life, or you can cut that free from your life and move on. You can purge yourself from those things and move on and live a productive life full of purpose. But going back to what you were talking about, someone coming into a movie theater and killing people. There's some people that no matter how much counseling you give them, they're so evil. People that do things like that, the reason they do mass murders and shootings like that, Dr. Kelly, is because they are perfectly possessed. They're obsessed with the devil, and they're perfectly possessed. And the devil has convinced them that if they go in and sacrifice X amount of people, that he's going to give them this. He never comes through this promise. They always get caught. They always spend the rest of their life in jail. They get the death penalty. He's a liar and a deceiver. Jesus said in John chapter 8, he was a liar from the beginning. And I've heard some people that are so spiritually minded, they're no earthly good. They've told me, well, he can't deceive me. I said, honey, let me tell you something. Adam and Eve walked with God. They seen God face to face, and he deceived them. What makes you think you're any different? Mm-hmm. He's been playing this game a long time, and people are deceived. Mm-hmm. That's become normal. We've normalized darkness. Mm-hmm. We've become obsessed with it. What do we think that our kids are going to do when they play video games? That's all they do is they shoot up the city and kill a bunch of people, and you earn points and you earn money doing hits on people, and you earn money by selling drugs. And what do we think is going to happen? Do we really think that we wouldn't see anything like this replicated in society? The problem is we've spent so much time trying to find things because we're so busy as parents to be babysitters to our kid, that the very thing that we've allowed to be babysitters to our children is creating them into being just people without feeling, people that reenact these things that they see in real life because, of the influences that the devil has, not just behind video games. And I'm not saying all video games are bad. Mm-hmm. I play video games sometimes myself. I'm not saying all movies are bad or anything like that. But we've got to be careful what we allow to influence us. Mm-hmm. Because, what you put into you mixes with what's already inside of you. And sometimes that can be good and sometimes it can be toxic. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it can be poisonous. Mm-hmm. So we have to be careful.
Yeah, it's really tough because especially when, and I'm thinking right now of younger age, high school age, you mentioned the key word here. And I want people to think about this for at least a day or two. How are you influenced? Let's ask that question for just a minute. Who do you allow to influence you? Why are you being influenced? Is there a reason why you're allowing someone to change the trajectory of how you think? Is it because you need to be with the cool kids? Is it because you need to, you feel invisible and you want to be seen? There's many reasons why people get influenced by, and I'm not going to call these people the wrong people. I'm going to call these people that might have slipped off the railroad track for some reason, and it leads to a more complicated life. They put themselves on a path of more complication rather than try to figure out a way to stay on track. Now, some people might say to me right now, well, you don't know what it's like to live with. Yeah, actually I do. And I know Bishop Joshua here, who sees these individuals continuously. I know that he goes every single day. So it's not easy for you to just cut the string and leave your job because these people are tormenting you, or leave your family because you don't like some people's behavior, or you get with this group of kids because they identify with what you're going through. So it's easy for you to talk to, or you feel comforted by being with a group that you feel understand what you're going through. So it's just easy to pal along with them. But the thing is it's not the point of being with people that you feel more comforted by. It's what is the ultimate influence that's coming to you at some point where you're out to figure out the next step in your path of life. I don't know. You do a lot of counseling, Joshua. So, Bishop Joshua, why don't you tell everybody if they want to reach out to you, what's going on, if you have any books in the works or anything like that? Okay.
Well, like you and I were talking earlier, I'm on Facebook. You can find me on there. Just my name on there is Joshua Sparks. I've started a new venture with TikTok.
Okay.
I do not know my link for TikTok. I will send it to you. That way you can put it up. And I'm on YouTube. It's under the Bishop's War Room. You can find me on YouTube. under the Bishop's War Room. And I do have a book that I'm getting ready to publish, and it is going to be, in my estimation, not just because I wrote it, but because I really feel that this book is going to be a great blessing and a great help to all that read it. Engaging in spiritual warfare. Back in October, we were in Bridgeport, Connecticut, defeating the demonic, and God gave me a powerful prayer called the Spiritual Warfare Prayer. And if anybody wants a copy of that, they can email me and I'll send it to them absolutely free of charge. And a Bible study, a companion Bible study that goes along with that. But Engaging in Spiritual Warfare is a book that God spoke to me to write, and I'm writing a series of 12, and this is book number 1. And what this book is meant to do is to equip believers to face the unseen battle of life with confidence in Christ's victory. Drawing on Scripture, practical experience, and the power of the Holy Spirit. This book exposes the strategies of the enemy and reveals the authority that Jesus gives to the church. And it walks us through discerning spiritual attacks, praying with boldness, using biblical weapons like faith and worship and the Word of God. And it's more than a call to fight. It's a call to intimacy with Jesus. And he's the ultimate warrior, not the guy that used to wrestle. I loved him in WWE, but he's the one who empowers his followers to overcome darkness and to bring light into a broken world. And that is pretty much the gist of this first book that I'm going to be releasing. Hopefully, sometime this, before Thanksgiving or Christmas. That's when I'd like to get it done and get it published. Rather, it's done. And it's in the editing process. Don't forget I am Appalachian, and I do have a doctorate degree, but I speak a good hillbilly. I have to really watch myself when I'm talking. But that's some of the things I got in the work, doing these TikTok videos, creating these reels, a minute, 32 minutes, has been very powerful. It's really helped me to connect to people all over the world. And I'm just new at it. So if you find me on there, please forgive me. I'm brand new at it. So I'm doing my best. But that's how they can. Also, I'm on the Unseen Realm with Archbishop Enright every Saturday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern time. I'm one of the panel members there. I've been an exorcist for over 20 years, and I've been with Archbishop Enright for that long. You can find me on there every Saturday. You can always email me. I'm always here. Reach out to me. And I would love to connect with anybody that wants to connect, that needs prayer. You have questions, write me. I'll answer you. I don't have a secretary that fields my calls or looks at my emails. I read every one of them, and I'd love to connect with you. That's my main thing, to connection, because and like I tell people that's an addiction, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. Connection's everything.
Right. And you also have a program explaining the unexplainable, and then you're starting up another podcast, I believe. What one was that?
It's going to be in October, and it's called The Bishop's War Room. And it's going to be a show where we have guests. Of course, Dr. Kelly will be on there. And we're going to have guests on there. And we're going to talk about things. The way that I would like to see it go, ultimately, is to be able to have people to be able to call in and talk to us live. Not necessarily a Q&A, but for people to actually call in and present a question or a challenge or just to share how they feel. With our guests that we have on, but I want to have it kind of like to have a guest come on, interview, and then have people ask questions. I don't want to use it as a preaching platform. I have plenty of platforms that I preach on, but this is going to be just a way for us to, highlight other people that's doing the same thing that we're doing as far as spiritual warriors.
Thank you so very much, Bishop Joshua, for being on the show today. Thank you for watching and listening to Paranormal Latte Podcast. We have been broadcasting on the United Public Radio and UFO Paranormal Radio Networks, 105.3 FM from the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM in New Orleans, as well as several listening platforms. The content, music, and creative sound effects as heard on Paranormal Latte Podcast are copyrighted and licensed commercially to Dr. Kelly Renee Schutz. Please do not reproduce in any manner without the express permission of Dr. Kelly Renee Schutz, Diamond Point Entertainment, LLC, Paranormal Universal Press, LLC, Paranormal Latte Podcast, and or any affiliated networks such as the United Public Radio and UFO Paranormal Networks. The opinions and information expressed by the guests, hosts, and sources as heard and seen on the Paranormal Latte Podcast are not necessarily those of Diamond Point Entertainment, LLC, Paranormal Universal Press, LLC, Paranormal Latte Podcast, and the United Public Radio and UFO Paranormal Networks, as well as their producers. Although the content of the shows may be interesting, the information and opinions within are deemed for entertainment purposes only. Subscribe to continue your enjoyment and interest, and thank you for making Paranormal Latte Podcast part of your day. Now that was good.